It's the foundation of our cities, it's the backbone of our infrastructure. It's a material so common we barely even notice it anymore. But inside every single block of concrete, there is a hidden story of chemistry, of physics, and a microscopic battle that decides whether a skyscraper stands or a bridge falls. So let's dig in and uncover that story. To get a sense of just how important this stuff is, let's just start with a number. Every year, we as a planet produce and use about 25 billion tons of concrete. That is just an absolutely staggering amount of material. It's shaping the world we live in on a scale that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. And this quote just puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? The only thing we use more of on this planet is water. Just let that sink in for a second. More than oil, more than wood, more than steel. Concrete is the silent, solid partner to pretty much everything we build. But this kind of brings up a weird question. We call it concrete, but up to 70% of it, it's just plain old rocks and sand. So if we want it to be super strong, why on earth would we fill it with so much of this, filler? It seems a little backwards, right? Well, the number one reason has nothing to do with strength. Not at all. It's about money. See, cement, that's the powder that acts as the binder, is the most expensive part of the recipe. So to make concrete work on a global scale, you have to pack it with as much cheap, local rock as you can get your hands on. Strength is actually something we have to engineer around this economic fact. All right, so let's take a closer look at the components that make up this incredible material and really get into why they are what they are. First off, not all rocks are created equal. The type of aggregate you'll find in concrete really just depends on the local geology. If you're in South India, you're probably using granites. Out on the Deccan Plateau, it's basalt. Head north to Delhi, you might find quartzite. Each one of these rocks has different properties, and that's going to be really important later on. But here's where we get to the real heart of it. We can talk about giant rocks and massive buildings all day, but the true secret to concrete strength, and it turns out its weakness, is happening at an almost invisible scale. It's all about the microscopic bond. And to understand that, we have to zoom way, way in. So we need to introduce the main character of our microscopic story. It's a region with a very technical name, but it has a hugely important job. This is the interfacial transition zone, or the ITZ. It's this tiny little halo that forms around every single piece of rock in the concrete mix. The best way to think of it is as the interface. It's the handshake between the rock and the cement paste that's supposed to hold the whole thing together. Okay, now here's the key. You have to understand that the ITZ isn't the same as the rest of the cement. It's different in some really critical ways. Because water gathers on the surface of the rock when you're mixing everything, this little zone becomes way more porous, and because of that, it's weaker. It has less of the good stuff, that's the calcium silicate hydrate that gives concrete its strength, and more of the weaker chemicals. So by its very nature, it is the weakest link in the chain. And just to give you an idea of how small we're talking here, this zone is only about 20 to 50 microns thick. A single human hair is about 70 microns thick. So this incredibly thin, weak layer is wrapped around billions of rocks in every single structure, and it's silently deciding that structure's ultimate fate. The fact that this weak zone even exists has some really dramatic and, visible consequences for how concrete actually behaves when it's put under pressure. So you're probably wondering, how can something so small have such a massive impact? How does a layer thinner than a hair determine the failure of a multi-ton beam? Well, it all comes down to the path of least resistance. In your standard run-of-the-mill concrete, when a crack starts to form, it's like a river looking for the easiest way down a mountain. It finds that weak, porous ITZ and it just follows it, snaking its way around the strong pieces of rock. It's a slower, more gradual failure. But in high-strength concrete, engineers do all sorts of things to strengthen the ITZ. And suddenly, that easy path is gone. It's blocked. So now, when a crack forms, the path of least resistance is also the shortest path, a straight line. The crack is forced to break right through the solid rock, and the result is a sudden, explosive, and much more brittle kind of failure. And this brings us right back to the beginning. If the ITZ is the key, and the ITZ forms on the surface of the rock, then the type of rock you choose has to matter, right? It has to be critical. And that is exactly what researchers found. The aggregate isn't just some passive filler taking up space. No, Its surface texture, its chemical makeup, its mineralogy, all of it actively influences how strong that bond, the ITZ, actually becomes. The rock is an active participant in creating strength. And you can see the proof right here in the data. This chart is from a study where they kept everything the same: the cement, the water, the mixed design, all of it. The only thing they changed was the type of rock. The concrete made with andesite was significantly stronger than the concrete made with quartzite. The only difference was the quality of that tiny microscopic bond, the ITZ. But look, it's not just about resisting a single powerful break. The long-term survival of a concrete structure, what we call its durability, depends on its ability to keep out invaders, like water and chemicals. And here again, the ITZ plays the starring role.
So think about it this way. If your rocks are spaced pretty far apart, their weak ITZ zones are like isolated little puddles. Water gets in, but it hits a dead end. But if you pack too much rock too closely together, those weak, porous ITZ zones can actually link up. They can create a continuous network, a superhighway for water to just flow deep inside the concrete, causing corrosion and all sorts of long-term damage.
You know, this led one researcher to make a pretty bold claim that just sums this whole thing up perfectly. He said that for all practical purposes, when you're trying to figure out why concrete is behaving the way it is, it all comes down to the ITZ.
That one tiny zone influences everything. We're talking its final, ultimate strength, its long-term durability against the elements, its tendency to shrink or creep over decades, and even how stiff it is. It's like the master controller, hiding in plain sight.
So the next time you're walking through a city and you look up at these incredible monuments of engineering, remember what you're really looking at. You're not just seeing concrete. You're seeing trillions upon trillions of tiny handshakes, a network of bonds, just a few microns thick, all working together to hold our world up. It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it? That the mightiest things we build are fundamentally governed by their weakest, most microscopic part. It really makes you wonder what other profound secrets are hiding in the materials we see and touch every single day.